Hello everyone and welcome to this second coding challenge video. In this one, I'm going to be trying to make a timestamps to basically clips converter where you can take a video and given timestamps of the video will automatically create as many of the timestamps versions of the video as there are, name the videos appropriately, and export them individually so you can have your entire long video cut up into clips, which is a very popular thing that like Joe Rogan and many other podcasts do to have sort of snippets of the longer form content. So basically I'm going to try and convert timestamps into clips and export them automatically and automate the entire process. Before we get started, I do want to remind you down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly on the channel. And down in the description, you can check out the code for this on GitHub. Follow us there as well. And down in the description, you can follow us on Instagram too and get live updates. If you want to be a member of the Discord server, you can come and get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, expressions, and much more. And you can also become a channel member on our YouTube channel by helping support us and get cool perks at the same time. So I haven't obviously started the script. The whole point of these challenge videos is to do it from scratch, the entire process recorded. But I have this comp markers tutorial video that's about 8.5 minutes long, almost 9 minutes, and I have basic timestamps here, and the goal is to feed it in a text file with these timestamps and then get 5 videos exported. Now obviously the outro may not be a section of the video you want to export, but in our case we want to cover all of the timestamps. So to get started, we're going to need to create like a text file with our timestamps here. So I will go ahead and just load up Notepad, paste these, and our separator for each of the timestamps is going to be a new line. So basically as many rows are in our text file, or you could do it with a CSV easily and modify this later. Basically the number of rows is the number of videos it's going to spit out. I'm just going to save this on my desktop and we'll call this timestamps, and it will just be a text file. Now in terms of the script itself, we're going to be obviously using a script to automate the editing process based on this information. We're basically going to extract 2 pieces of information for each video. We need the name as well as the time. And basically the start time of the video is going to be there, starting there, and we're going to increment through. And the end time is going to be the next video, or if we're on the last, it's going to be the length of the entire video. So the only thing we really need in our script is a section to choose the timestamps file. We're going to assume that they have the video open up in a composition, and then the script is going to do the rest. So let's create a new window. We'll say window is equal to a new window. We're going to call this clip video by timestamps. And the first argument is supposed to be the type of window. So we'll say a palette type window. The name of the window is that with an undefined size. The window orientation we'll set to be a column. We're going to have 2 groups, one for our inputs of the timestamps file, the other for our button to initialize everything. So I'll say group 1 is equal to our window. We're going to add a group, undefined size, call it group 1. We'll set the orientation of group 1 equal to a row from left to right. Then we're going to need an edit text box for our location. So we'll just say timestamp edit text is equal to group1 dot add edit text. And that's going to have undefined size, and the text by default will just say timestamp file. I'm also going to set up the size of this. So timestamp edit text dot size. We'll make it like 200 by 25. That should be good for now. And we're also going to need a little button we can click next to it to update the file if we need to. So I'm going to say timestamp button is equal to group1 dot add. I'm going to add a button, undefined size dot dot dot, and this we're going to now set the size of that timestamp button to be a square 25 by 25. And now we need a second group, we'll call group 2, and this is going to be for our button to sort of initialize the whole thing and begin the process. So we're just going to call this group 2. Group 2.orientation is equal to a row. And we're going to add our start button. And we're going to add this to group 2. Add a button. I think start should be a fine name for it. And lastly, we're going to take our window, center it, and take our window and show it. Now we have our basic UI. Pretty simple. We're going to have our timestamp file here, which we can then click on this to update, and then a start button to initialize everything. Now, we could probably make this a little bit bigger. It's going to make it pretty much larger, a lot larger than the start group, but that's fine. Now let's add the functionality to get our file path. We're going to need a timestamp file to initialize this. So the way we get our timestamp file is by pressing the timestamp button. So timestamp button.onClick is equal to a function. What are we going to run? We're going to say var timestamp file is equal to a new file. Then we're going to set our timestamp file equal to itself dot I believe it's select or choose dialog. Select dialog is for folders. For files, how do we select a file? Looks like open. Open dialog. We got two forms of it. Let's just pick this one. Our prompt is going to be choose timestamp file. The filter, we're going to filter for a text file in this case. So we'll say star.txt. Multi-select we're going to have as false. We only want one file. Now we're going to say if timestamp file is equal to or is not equal to null, then what we're going to do is take our timestamp edit text.text, and we're going to update that to be our timestamp file location, or the actual FS name. And we're going to replace the weird space globally with a regular space. Sometimes when you grab the path of a file, it has this weird %20, which is sort of a representation of a space. So we're just going to replace that, make sure it's clean. If it is null, we're going to say no or not a valid file. Return false. And we're also going to update the timestamp edit text to be the original text when we initialized it. So timestamp file. And the reason we're going to do that is because when we press the start button, when we initialize everything, we're going to check that this is a valid file. And if they canceled it, we don't have a valid file. So now if we go ahead and run this, click on the button, we can select our text file here, timestamps.txt, which is now loaded in our interface. If we were to hit cancel, it's then going to give us this information right there, which is good. Should be a good little check. And now we are good to proceed forward with our start button. So we'll say start button dot onClick is equal to a function. There's two things we need to check before we can begin the process of clipping our timestamps and all that. The first of which is to make sure that the file selected inside of here is valid. So to do that, I'm going to say if file, and the path to our file is going to be timestamp edit text.text. And we're going to check if this file exists, but we actually want to check the inverse of that. If it does not exist, then we're going to say please select a valid timestamp file first. And then we'll return false, so we exit out of this bit of code. Then we also need to check that there's an open composition, an active composition here. A very common check I do, which is just saying if app.project.activeItem, if it's equal to null, that's an issue. And the other issue that says that it's not a composition is if we invert the logic of saying app.project.activeItem is an instance of a comp item. So if there is no active item, that's a problem. And if there is an active item but is not a composition, Then we want to tell the user, please select a composition first, return false. Now, after these checks, we have successfully validated that we have a valid timestamps file that we can read in, and we also have a composition that we can use to duplicate and cut according to our timestamps. So now we can run main. It doesn't have to be called main, it's just indicates to me that that's the main functionality of our script, and we're going to pass two arguments into main, the first of which is going to be our timestamps file. So file with the path timestamp edit text.text. The second argument is going to be our composition app.project.activeItem. Now we can define this main function with our timestamps file or timestamp file as well as our comp. And now we can begin the main process. The idea I think I'm going to approach this with is to essentially say, loop through and duplicate our composition for as many rows of text as we have. And then we'll need a couple of edge cases for like when you reach the outro, because for the introduction, the start time will be from 0 to the next row's time. But once we get to outro, there is no next row to check, so it'll need to be to the video's duration. And let's first check inside of our main here that we're getting valid files or valid variables, just to make sure that we're ready to proceed. So I'll go ahead and select a timestamp file and hit start. We get our timestamps.txt and our comp item. Now just one more check. If we hit cancel here and hit start, it makes sure that we need a valid timestamp file inside of here as well. So now we are good to proceed forward. I'm going to make sure I save this so I don't lose everything. And I'm just going to call this clip video by timestamps. And now let's go ahead and read our file first. So I'll create a variable called timestamp info. Then I'm going to take my timestamp file and open it so that we can read it. I'm going to set my timestamp info equal to timestamp file.read, and then I'm going to close my timestamp file to make sure that there's no open leaking or anything like that. So now our timestamp info should contain this entire bit of text. Now we're going to want to create an array for each of the rows. So I'm going to say var timestamp rows is equal to our timestamp info, and we're going to split it by a line return. So now if I alert our timestamp rows, and then let's alert timestamp rows index 0. Index 0 should give us introduction-000. So let's go ahead and run this. Select our file. Hit start. So for the entire timestamp rows, we get all of our information. And for, looks like we're not getting a proper split, or that's the name actually. I keep putting timestamps instead of timestamp. Try this again. Get the whole bit of text, and now we are still getting just that. So we need to solve why that might be. Does this need to be n? Let's try it. Sometimes it's /r, sometimes it's /n, and sometimes it's both, it seems. So let's check the length. I might just be thinking of this wrong. I need to make sure it's formatted correctly to make sure it's easy to loop through. So timestamp rows is the whole thing, and the length is 1. It's reading as 1. Does it need to be like this? N? Or does it need to be both? Length is now 5. If I go 0, it should give me the first element, which is our introduction. Okay, perfect. Now timestamp rows is formatted correctly. We're going to loop through it. So we'll say for, and since we're starting at 0, because it's an array, say var I is equal to 0, I is less than, say I is less than our timestamp rows dot length, I plus plus. And for every time we go through a different row, we need to do a series of steps, but they're pretty much going to be the same each time through. First, let's create a variable for the current comp. Actually, let's create an array called clipped comps. And what we're going to do each time is duplicate it. So I'm going to say clipped comps.push. We're going to take our comp.duplicate, and then we're going to start doing some things like naming it. Clipped comps I dot name is equal to something, and then we need to set up the custom duration. So for the name, we need to grab all the text before the dash. We're going to assume all of our timestamps have this dash, and we're going to grab everything before that. So what I'm going to do then is take timestamp rows I dot slice, and we're going to slice from the beginning of the string to the dash. So that's going to be timestamp rows I dot index of dash. That should give us the right name. Then let's actually open that up. Clipped comps I dot open in viewer. That way we can kind of see what's going on. Then the next thing we need to do is change the start time and end time of what this composition is going to be. So let's create a variable called start time, set equal to 0. We'll also create one called end time. And what we're going to do first is say clipped comps I dot work area start is equal to start time. And then if timestamp rows I plus 1 exists, basically if there's a row past the one we're looking at, which would be the next row, then we're going to set the end time as that time. So in order to, we're going to have to convert this time into After Effects time, I think. Which we'll have to further go in here and separate. This is basically going to be seconds for minutes and seconds. But if it's longer, so this may only have support for like less than an hour right now. Let's just add a note. Currently only supports videos less than an hour long. Hopefully people can live with that, but we can always update it in the future. Basically, if it was more than an hour, we'd have to check for things like that. We'd have to check for multiple colons, which if it becomes an easy thing, we'll do that. But for now, we're just going to focus on minutes and seconds. So if the next row exists, the end time is going to be equal to we're going to make a function called convert to AE time. And all we're going to be converting is this bit of text here, which is going to be the index of a hyphen plus 2, I believe. So we're going to say timestamp rows I, and we're going to slice between the index of the hyphen plus 2, So if this is the index plus 2, and then the end of it is just timestamp rows I dot length. Then we'll create a function called convert to AE time. And this is going to give us a time string. And the time string is going to be composed of two things. Everything before the colon, which is our minutes, and everything after, which is going to be our seconds. So we'll say minutes text is equal to our time string dot slice from 0 to time string dot index of colon, and then we'll have seconds text, which will be equal to the index of the hyphen plus 1 to the length of our time string. Now, in order to convert this into furthermore AE time, it needs to be to base 60 instead of base 10. I believe that's what this is base 10. The seconds are base 60, but the minutes are a bit different. So in order to get the minutes, we're going to say var AE minutes is going to be equal to parse int minutes text times 60. And our AE seconds is going to be equal to the same thing, I believe. Yeah, it's all AE time is based on seconds. If you have a composition that's 2 minutes, it's 120 length. So that's just going to be parse int seconds text. Then our final time should be AE minutes plus AE seconds. We'll return final time. Now I hope that's accurate. Let's go ahead and alert final time, which should give us conversions for each of these. And go ahead and select our timestamps file. Hit start. And we're not currently getting an alert. We successfully duplicated the comp. We've changed the name to introduction. We haven't opened it in the viewer though. Why is that? Am I wrong to think that that's open in viewer? It should be opening it. Clipped comps I dot open in viewer. Can't spell. I'm also gonna add a begin and undo group. So app.begin undo group, timestamp clip cutting, and at the very end, app.end undo group. This might mess up because we're rendering stuff, but I want to be able to, in testing at least, be able to quickly test this stuff. Now hopefully we will get the alert of our final times. 0, 78, which, yes. The next one should be 390, or 210. Oh, my math is way off. 180 plus 30. Then we have 410, which is 4 times 60 plus 10 is 250. And the last one, 754, should give us 474. Or we didn't quite get there. That's because it's going to need to do the duration, and we didn't reach this case. Otherwise, end time is equal to our comp.duration. Now, that is working fine. Our convert to AE time function is actually working really well. Perhaps we could change that to the future to support hours as well, but we're just going to move right along here. And we're now going to set the we have the work area start time set. Now we need to set the work area end time. So clipped comps I dot work area duration. We can't actually set the endpoint. We need to set the duration. So the duration is going to be our end time minus our start time. And then that should give us all the proper lengths. Let's go ahead and test it out real quick. When we run it, we're not getting accurate result there. Clipped comps.work area duration. Let's alert our end time and alert our start time. See what error is coming up here. 0, 0. This needs to be I plus 1 because this is checking the next row's time, but in this case it's checking the current rows. So that should solve that problem. I'm going to remove these alerts because I'm confident. Select our timestamp file. Confidence was a bad idea. Let's bring back in our alerts and see what's going wrong here. None, 0. I plus 1. I forgot another I plus 1. Confidence is back. If this works, it should open up all the comps and have them all trimmed to the proper length. Which, in this case, it almost does. The work area start, oh, we're not changing our start time. So after we set the work area duration, the start time needs to become the previous end time, I believe. We'll run this. Perfect. So now these are the proper length. I think we should be good to go off to the next step, which is exporting these. If we add these to the render queue, it's going to be the proper length, and these have the proper names. I'm not going to get too fancy with this and add like transitions and stuff, but if you wanted, you could like automate text, a title to appear with the proper name. But right now, the name of the files and everything should be good enough. Let's do the rendering process. I'm going to nab some code from previous examples. I'm just going to dive in here. We'll grab render. AME render. Sometimes these projects get pretty complicated, but let's do that. One of the stipulations of this is going to be, while we are using Adobe Media Encoder, the way it's going to work is it's going to export in the last format someone last used, including the last codec and format preset. So basically what that means is if you last exported a GIF file in a certain formatting, every time you add something with this automation to it, it's going to render out in that format. So what we're going to do is set the format up beforehand of what we want, and then everything will render out just fine. So we will add them to the queue each time in the loop. I'm going to create variables up here, a render queue item, that way we don't have problems. Render queue item. Just going to declare these here, and then that. Now, inside of our loop, our render queue item is going to be equal to the current comp we're adding, which needs to be clipped comps I. Our module is then going to be the output module. For an output path, we need to use, I guess we didn't have that in the UI. Let's just use the desktop for now. So our module is going to use we're going to grab the output module. So when we add something to the render queue, this is our output module. We're going to change the file of the module, which is this right here, and we're going to tell it to go on the desktop. So we're just going to say relative path to the desktop. We're going to add our clipped comps i.name.avi because that's the default format. Don't worry though, because we're adding it to media encoder, which is still loading for some reason. We're having some issues. Hopefully that will be working okay. We do need that to work for this script to properly work. And then once we have our file defined here, which uses our desktop path, our clipped comp name, we're going to add that to the render queue. The true value means to render immediately, which we're going to set to false. We want to do it on the very last part of this loop. So I'm going to say if I is less than our timestamp rows.length -1. Then we're going to say add it to the queue with false. If we're on the very last one, then we want to add it to the queue and render. We don't want to begin the render until we're done with the After Effects work. It looks like a universe effect is giving me an issue here. That might be a problem. But I think this is pretty much ready to test out once media encoder decides to work. It's a little bit annoying. Let's go ahead and just run this and see if it will maybe run better with the script. I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and now I'm gonna try and run it. Select our timestamps file, hit start. And there's the undo problem I was talking about. But as you can see, we did not add our intro. That's interesting. So, oh wow. It's been wanting to do a lot. So, in order to set up your format, just drop any clip. Just drop any clip into media encoder. Or anything really. Why won't it let us? It's behaving very strangely right now. All you need to do is bring something in, choose your format, choose your quality, and then delete it. Now anything you export is going to be in that format. Now I'm going to remove my end undo group because that's causing some issues. And I think that might be why we don't have the introduction. We might have tried to undo it. In fact, it doesn't even exist, so definitely. Remove all these comps because we got a weird error. So, okay, start from scratch. Select our timestamps file. Hit start. Okay, it's adding these to the render queue way too often. It's working, but it's adding too many. Why might that be? Oh, okay. Yes, we need to we're going to remove all this checking, and at the very end of the for loop, we're going to queue an AME, because I believe it adds all of the jobs from the render queue to media encoder. So we can't undo, which is a little bit unfortunate for testing, but we'll be okay. We'll run it, open up our comp, select our timestamps file, hit start, and now we should begin the process of exporting our individual clips based on the timestamp lengths. Now, I'm not going to sit here and wait for the entire render of all these to finish, but we can look inside of here to see that the timing of all of these clips is correct, and it's going to render out just these selected clip areas, which go sequentially, one after the other. Now, I could obviously go into much more depth. There's a couple things that we can add updates to maybe in the future, which are adding support for timestamps longer than an hour, which are in the format of hour, minute, minute, second, seconds. You would just need to update the formatting of our convert to AE time. You could add an exception to say, like, if there are two colons, then we know we need to have the processing of hours, minutes, and seconds, or if there is one colon in our time string here, just process the minutes and seconds. But I think that is going to do it for this video, guys. Very simple script, and seems to work quite well. You could go in and add a couple more things, like you could take the name of the composition, introduction, comp markers, explanation, marker properties, and add like a text that pops up, or you could add a fade in and a fade out. But the general idea of what I wanted to do is complete, and that's going to be the end of this coding challenge. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button. Down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly on the channel. And down in the description, you can check out this code for yourself, try it out, update it, and turn your video clips into shorter video clips with timestamps. And follow us there on GitHub as well. In the description, you can also follow us on Instagram for updates. And if you're not a member of our Discord server, you can join us and get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, expressions, and much more. And you can also follow us and support us on YouTube as a channel member, get cool perks, and help us out financially. Thanks again for watching this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time.